First reading this morning is from the book of Lamentations, chapter 3. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke in youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust, that there may yet be hope, to give one's cheek to the smitter, and be filled with insults. For the Lord will not reject forever. Although he causes grief, he will have compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. Holy wisdom, holy word.
The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark from the 5th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus had crossed again in the boat on the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be well and live." So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, and she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched me?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw commotion, people weeping and wailing loud. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. Jesus strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Two daughters, one older, the other still living with her parents, both at death's door because of illness. The older had spent her resources, her money, her time, her possessions, and received nothing in return. In fact, she was even worse than when she had begun. For years, she had suffered from a disease that had become a scourge for her. And I use that word scourge because the Greek reminds us that this disease was like that scourge that was used as a whip that had those razor blades on the end of it. Whenever you strike someone with it, it digs into your skin and it pulls. This disease had been like that to her. It had taken all of her life from her. She had suffered the pain and the loss of not only physical life, but also communal life as she was shunned for impurity. How do I know this? Because this is what happens in the society with Jesus. Because of the social rules of her culture, she was unable to touch anyone, especially men, lest she would cause ritual impurity. So she wouldn't go to the market to buy food. She couldn't go to eat with others. She couldn't go to community gatherings. Her own presence here was wrong. Why was she here in this gathering where Jesus was? Because she no doubt had heard about the teacher. She heard about him coming, and she knew that he had healed others, and she said, "If I but touch the hem of his garment." She didn't even want a word. She just wanted to touch the hem of his garment in order to be healed. As he had arrived, Jairus had met Jesus at the seashore. Dignitaries always meet the important people when they arrive, don't they? Even still today. Someone important arrives in Defiance, of course all the dignitaries will meet. He too, no doubt, had heard of Jesus' miracles, and he knew that Jesus would be able to cure his daughter, but he was important. He knew that Jesus would come to him first and foremost, and he did not see the crowd. He did not know that there would be such a crowd. Surely, however, Jesus would listen to him, a leader of the community. Jairus' problem would be at the top of Jesus' list, wouldn't it? It is a story of status in a lot of ways. An outcast was less important than the daughter of a dignitary. That's very clear from this gospel. Things haven't changed in the world today. We still believe that there are those who deserve and those who don't deserve. I mean, we do it every day. I do it every day. I even tell my son sometimes, "You can't do that. You didn't do this first." We make our own rules and our own laws based upon our own encounters with one another. And yet this woman's encounter with Jesus, the one who tears down the walls between us, is a different one. It seems plausible to ask, who would be worthy, more worthy of Jesus' attentions? This one woman who had suffered for 12 years and who needs attention now, or this little girl who was sick at home? But when we look at Jesus' actions, we realize something more important. Jesus is present in the moment. And this is important for us. This is important because it reminds us that what has gone on in the past and what goes on in the future is not of importance to us. What is of importance is this moment now, and this moment with Jesus. On his way to Jairus' house to heal this young daughter, this important young daughter, this other challenge arises, and instead of turning from the challenge, Jesus turns, looks at the woman, and speaks to her. He recognizes her need, and he reminds her that she is saved. Saved from a lifetime of illness, a lifetime of separation, a lifetime of less than dignity. While saving the one, however, the news comes for Jairus' daughter, "Why bother the teacher? Your daughter is dead." And Jesus, in the face of that bad news, turns it around and says those very important words that we all need to hear. Do not fear, only believe. Take those words to heart. Do not fear, only believe, Jesus says. It's a good reminder for us in those moments when we think that Jesus is spending too much time on someone else's problem or someone else's prayer, or Jesus is not moving quickly enough for us, even in those times when life starts to go sideways. Jesus says, do not fear, only believe. But that's hard, isn't it? It's hard in those moments when fear is right at the top of our emotions. In an age of instant satisfaction, we don't want to wait on anyone. We can get something from Amazon right now if we order it fast enough. And that includes Jesus. We want answers, and we want them now. We want our leaders to take care of problems now. In that mentality, lots of problems ensue for us. Drug offenders are jailed without finding out what I think is the more important question. Why are people taking drugs in the first place? And we don't ask that question because we don't want to know, and we don't want to take the time that it will take in order to find out. And what about prostitutes? They're jailed. Why not jail the people who are taking their services? Because we don't want to take the time to know why people are doing those things. When we need money right now, we don't wait. We need it right now, and if the funds are not in the bank, we don't wait to go to a bank to get a loan. We go to those money lenders that exploit the public. And then we sit back and we wonder, as we watch people do that, why in the world would you do that? Instead of asking ourselves and asking the person, why do you do that? What is the need within you? What is the desire within you that needs some attention? Like so many in our lives, this woman has waited for years. She didn't have Amazon. She didn't have all of these instant ways of getting gratification. She had to wait, and she had spent all that she had. No one had taken real interest in her until Jesus came along. She had put her faith in the latest healers, the latest healing techniques, with worse results. And yet, when she simply touched the hem of Jesus' garment, she was healed. Salvation is not what we imagine. And while lingering with the woman, Jairus' daughter had died, and yet, in the midst of what looked like death and chaos, Jesus raised her from the dead. We have too narrow a view of God's salvation. Salvation comes in most unexpected ways, not as a mighty army wiping out all the woebegons in our lives, but salvation is living, and it's not a thing. It is God, the living God, present in our lives through Jesus Christ. He comes in ways much simpler than we can imagine. A touch in a trusting relationship, a reaching out in faith. It's that simple. In other ways, salvation means much more difficult things for us for the very same reasons. A simple touch from Jesus, a trusting relationship, a reaching out in faith. We want it to be something more. We want it to be more than just Jesus reaching out to us. But I need to do something. But you need to do something in order to deserve it. And that is not what Jesus shows us today. Salvation for these two women is salvation for the world. God in Jesus Christ has entered our world, reached out to us in healing, and given to us all the faith that we need, period. That is salvation. And I am just crazy enough to believe that when we trust that Jesus is enough, we will believe in a more compassionate world.